Hi, patrons.
Hey, folks, this will be a short one,
Yeah, real short.
but butted up to the long one that we just did.
Yeah. So the long uncut one that you will see will have had parts of today's episode in it a week ahead of time because we decided way late in the game to convert this into a two-parter.
Yeah, like we decided like right before the last section.
Yeah. Like this has already gone an hour and 10 minutes and we still have two sections to get through.
Yeah, we
So
like to party.
we like to party. Okay. Ready?
Give me 1 second. I'm getting my wife is like, "Did you eat yet?" And I was like, "No, I'm in the middle of recording a podcast. I always never eat before the podcast." And so they're at Moe's though, so I'm gonna get my order in real quick.
Nice.
Sorry. I know this is like super everybody at the like all the patrons are like, fucking what does Shane eat at Moe's? I'm sure that's like what everybody's thinking right now.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say it out loud because I feel embarrassed. I'm
So
just
you're
kidding.
getting
I don't
pineapple.
feel embarrassed because I like to eat what I like to eat.
You're getting pineapple pizza, aren't you?
I'm ordering pineapple pizza from Moe's.
His shame
Okay.
could not be greater. Shane, shame.
Shane shame. Oh, poor Shane shame. I think that's it. Okay. Done. All right. I'm ready now. Sorry for that delay. That was
Sweet.
a sudden thing. So,
All good.
all
Okay.
right. Let's do this.
All right. And three, two, one, go. Welcome to Why We Do What We Do. I am your still wagering host, Abraham.
And I'm your jackpot host, Shane. Pew
Ooh, that was
pew.
a good one. We're a psychology podcast. We talk about the things that people do. And lately, we've been talking for several weeks now, a couple months at least, about the topics of addiction. And we have allowed these conversations to mostly just evolve into these just marathon long discussions that have happened. But this last time, we decided we had gone too far. We had to draw the line somewhere. So
Someone had to stop us, and it was us. We stopped us.
yes. So if you are catching us right now, this is a follow up to our part one episode. We were talking about, well, we were about to talk about gambling addiction. Um, so we had set up the history of like gambling and casinos and talked a bit about, just how the ideas of like things that were trying to get people into casinos and how gambling sort of developed over time and what it is and all of that. And all that's great, but we didn't actually get to talk about gambling addiction, and so we will have to tackle that today. But first, if you were joining us for the first time, welcome. I Most of these episodes will stand on their own. However, because this is a two-parter, it would probably be helpful for you to go back and hear the discussion that preceded this one in the previous episode where we talked about how casinos and gambling work. And
Yes.
nevertheless, this will have a lot of self-contained content as well.
Yeah, so we have been really taking kind of a loose flow format to this show, or the series at least.
I
And
think so.
I think that works really well for this discussion. And so today we are finishing up the part on gambling addiction, talking about some of the things like some, we're going to talk about a lot of things underneath this. But before we do that, we've got to share some holidays. And the day that you're
Yeah.
listening to this episode is Bring Flowers to Someone Day. Who that someone is, I don't know.
That is lovely. Yeah. And that means that, by the way, it is May 15th. So just in case you weren't sure what day it is, well, I guess I'm telling you now. It is also
Yeah.
Buddha Day.
It's also Dinosaur Day, so it's peace and dinosaurs and flowers. I love that.
Yes. It is Emergency Medical Services Day. That's important.
important. It's also International Conscientious Objector Day, which I really like.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can get on board with that. It is International Kangaroo Care Awareness Day. Very important to take care of our kangaroos.
Oh yes, absolutely. Those things. I mean, well, I don't know. I hear they're kind of mean. They drown things.
Oh, uh-oh.
Yeah, they're like a little bit aggressive from what I understand. But no, you should still take care of them. I guess maybe part of the care awareness is like don't treat them near bodies of water.
There you go.
It's a National Chocolate Chip Day. Love that.
Okay. It is National Juice Slush Day. Sure.
I mean, if you like slushies, I guess. Not my thing. I don't like really sweet, sugary fruit drinks like that, but you know,
Yeah.
everybody's got their thing. It is
This is a long one.
this is a long one. It is relive your past by listening to the first music you ever bought, no matter what it was. No excuses day.
Wow.
What would you be listening to?
Let's see. The first music I ever bought, I think was Chumbawamba.
I actually kind of like that. I think mine was Blink 182 actually.
Oh, see,
It was Dude Ranch.
I wish that it was Blink-182, but I'm pretty sure that it is Chumbawamba. I think.
That's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
Chumbawamba is like a pretty radical punk band, like pretty aside from their hit song.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the Tub Thumping album, I think was the one that I got. So,
Yeah, they I don't know if you have followed their career since then, since you're such a huge fan, but the day that Margaret Thatcher died, they released a specific song celebrating her death.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, they had it recorded for many, many years, and they just were waiting for her to die.
So yours, you get to have Blink-182 and I'm listening to okay.
I
Uh
get knocked down, but
yeah.
I get up again.
The is also importantly International Family Day. That's nice.
Oh, I love that. It is also National Straw Hat Day, which is fun. Stay shady.
It is Food Allergy Awareness Day. Stay shady from that too.
It's Food Allergy Awareness Week.
Oh, sorry. Beep. It is Food Allergy Awareness Week. So spend 1 week not eating foods that you're allergic to.
I like that. And the rest of the year, just do with it what you will. It's Hospital Week. So go visit your favorite hospital. Sometimes they have good vegan food in their cafeterias.
Do they really?
We used to because the cafeterias were open 24/7 in this one hospital in Orlando. We would play shows and we would all go to the hospital and eat vegan chicken nuggets together.
Wow. Okay.
We have pictures of us, like 50 of us hanging out in the hospital cafeteria at like midnight with vegan chicken nuggets. It was great. It was such a good time.
That's such a bizarre story. I just really love it. It is. There's so many unexpected twists and turns in just that short story. And just like imagining a bunch of punks sitting around a hospital eating vegan chicken nuggets is pretty funny.
That's exactly what happened.
Okay. It is National Bike to Work Week. I love this so much. And I wish that I biked to work every week.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically I could, but I would just be riding back to my house. I would just do a loop around my neighborhood and then go right back to my house.
Nice.
It's National Women's Health Week, super important.
Definitely. And Dementia Awareness Week, also important.
Very, very important. Absolutely.
Now, interestingly, as we said, this is our we're talking about gambling. We're following up our previous discussion on gambling, and today we're talking about gambling addiction. And this episode comes out on May 15th, and this is our 7-year anniversary as a podcast.
Oh, happy birthday, us.
Yeah, happy birthday us. So I guess this is our 7-year episode, and 7 makes a lot of sense to be talking about gambling, as lucky number 7 is a common thing in gambling circles. So
yeah.
So gambling, yeah, it makes that's why we did it, I guess.
Yeah, there is a really great song by a band called The Scandals, and they have a song called Lucky Sevens. So go listen to that if you like that. If you like kind of like Gainesville drunk punk type of stuff.
And there was a goofy movie called Lucky Number 11 that I don't think had anything to do with gambling, but
no.
Yeah.
That was a fun movie though. Josh Hartnett's back apparently. He's doing a new movie for M. Night Shyamalan.
Oh, okay. I mean, could choose a better director probably, but That's
I don't
fine.
know. It looks pretty good. It's called Trap, and apparently he's the serial killer in it. Ooh.
Oh, ooh, okay. Well, I do think so. He was in the most recent season of Black Mirror, and he
Okay.
played quite the villainous character in that episode. Very ruthless, and that was a lot of
Okay.
fun. I'm pretty sure that was him.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, he's great.
yeah.
I mean,
Anyway,
like go watch his body of work. The Faculty,
yeah.
Lucky Number 11, 30 Days of Night. Great
All this
stuff.
is to
Central
say,
Park.
we're unpacking more of addiction. All right, now Justin, I'm gonna record two intros on this, depending on where we choose to cut up the last one. So, intro number one. Last time we basically all we got to describe was the history of gambling and up through talking about casinos. But there's another important piece of understanding gambling addiction, and that has to do with understanding, I think, how probability works, and that's related in a way to essentially understanding how reinforcement works to maintain problematic, like, well, I mean, it can maintain any kind of behavior, but it can specifically maintain problematic behavior when that behavior persists to the point of being harmful, particularly at the rate at which it may occur. So we'll go ahead and let's start by going there. I think is understanding gaming probability. That's intro number one. All right, intro number two. Assuming that we instead started at um, what was the other one we could have started at? Treatment.
Gambling
No, gambling
addiction.
addiction. That's what it was. Okay. Beep. So last time we basically talked about everything except gambling addiction. I think we set up clearly the history of casinos, understanding that the history of gambling and wagering, up all the way through how the sort of the schedules of reinforcement and the probabilities of gambling really do support, and I think initiate and maintain a high level of an engagement that leads to gambling addiction. So it's worth then unpacking and actually diving into here what gambling addiction is.
Beautiful.
Okay, great. So there's one of two intros we may be using, and Justin, you'll know because I will have made that clear at some point when I listen back through the first one and tell you where to segment out based on time, probably more than anything.
Yeah.
Okay. Beep. Okay, so I think we more or less established how I think the important and relevant features of understanding sort of gambling and the things that like what gambling addiction starts to look like. So another I think important piece here is talking then about treatment.
Yes. So, because anytime we talk about a what can be described as a problem, we also want to look at solutions. So, when we start
Yeah.
unpacking addiction treatment, we could probably do its own episode. Which I mean, we've already broken this episode up into a million parts, so it is very possible we could end up in there at some point in time. But we are going to revisit kind of a little bit about what has been done or what is being done. But it's also worth looking at the history of attempts to treat various addictions. That would be a lot of fun. But behavior addictions are a little different and often include a lot of unique treatments. A lot of kind of people going, well, maybe this will work, and then
Yeah.
doing something really wacky.
And as I said, like we'll probably spend a whole discussion at some point in a separate episode talking about the history of treatments for addiction. So this will be sort of a relatively brief overview as it pertains to gambling specifically. And also
Right.
this isn't really necessarily unpacking the history. This is just sort of talking about what is out there. So
Right.
gambling and other behavioral addictions in general are often characterized as impulsivity or being impulsive, right? And
Sure.
this is something that is quantitatively described by behavior analysts using something called the delayed discounting model. And essentially, this states that the longer one must wait for a reward, the less valuable that reward becomes. Have we talked about delayed discounting before in like a full treatment length? Because I know we've talked
Uh,
about doing one on it, but I don't think we have.
I think that we've talked about it a few times in terms of like it's come up in certain episodes, but I don't think that we've ever done like a full on episode on it, which we probably should.
Yes. Yeah, I think it would be worth doing a deep dive on that model if we haven't already, because it's there's a lot that's been done on this and it's been applied to a lot of different things. But
Right.
anyway, as I said, essentially the idea here is that people tend to, if they have to wait for a reward, even if it's larger, they'll tend to choose the reward that's more immediate, even if it's smaller. And so that's called delayed discounting. And the people who are more willing to choose those sort of smaller, sooner rewards over the larger, later rewards, they describe that behavior as being impulsive. And it suggests that interventions that focus on impulse control may be effective at reducing gambling behaviors if people who gamble are, in fact, impulsive.
Right. And so far and away, the most common and most researched of the interventions that are used for gambling are CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, for those of you who are not familiar, in which the intention of CBT, this intervention, is to A, correct cognitive distortions about gambling, B, develop problem solving skills, C, teach social skills, and D, teach relapse prevention. So, this kind of CBT package is designed to really address maybe what they describe as what they think is the core problem, which is a cognitive distortion of it, not necessarily a neurological addiction or a behavioral, like all the reinforcers and stuff. It's actually
Yeah.
looking specifically at like how people are thinking about addiction, changing that, creating skills, and actually doing behavioral skills to address that kind of the thought pattern and all that, and go from there.
Yes. And I think, the more contemporary acceptance and commitment training and therapy would suggest that you can't change people's thoughts. But what you can do is you can have them be less distressed by those thoughts, by essentially allowing themselves to consider those thoughts as just being thoughts and then to engage in alternative behaviors. And
Right.
so that's one important feature I think that you see most commonly, is that cognitive behavioral therapy is really frequently cited as an important component to treatment for behavioral addiction, or any kind of any. I mean, it's for lots of things, but for as far as behavioral addiction with respect to gambling goes, that one comes up. Um,
Yeah.
Another common strategy here is called motivational interviewing. We did an episode on this back in episode 247, so like a little over 100 episodes ago.
That's all.
Wow. Yeah, that's all.
That's
And that
crazy.
consists of conversations to take the person's perspective and help them identify their own reasons for wanting to change their behavior. And that's how motivational interviewing sort of works.
Yeah. We also, there's something that is in the research right now is guided self help, which is kind of what it sounds like. It's just kind of mostly workbooks. I say research, it's just out there. But it is
Yeah.
something that people are doing. It's just kind of looking through workbooks and looking at different scenarios and practices and role play scenarios and kind of working through those with maybe with some guidance.
Yeah, yeah. It's intended to sort of help you answer the kinds of questions that you might encounter in a therapeutic environment in such a way that you can engage with it at your own pace, on your own time, and it may have a similar impact. But that is, if it was that effective, I think that those would be much more commonly talked about. I think that it does work really well for some people. So if you're one of those,
Right.
seek those out. But for others, they need something different.
For sure.
There's another strategy here called personalized feedback. And this is a strategy to measure and compare people's behavior to other people's behavior. And it's sort of specifically designed to try and help them see the discrepancy and what they're doing compared to what other people are doing. So they're sort of saying, like, I think this is relevant, particularly for people who think that they don't have a problem or that their problem isn't very much of a problem, is they might say, like, okay, well, let's just look at how much you gamble relative to how much most people gamble. Like, you are there every night this week. Most people did not go even one night this week. So
Right.
that's higher than average. Um, you know, and so I think that's I think the rationale and the part of the intention of this as a component to intervention is to help people, I think, recognize what may be considered a pathology in their behavior.
Right. There's also relapse prevention, which is kind of an isolated component of CBT. It seems like that. But what it does is it consists of helping the individual identify high risk situations that are likely to result in gambling behavior. So essentially, what they're saying is, hey, like if you walk into the scenario, you know that you are highly likely or you are at risk of doing X, Y, and Z. Like I think of like Charles Bukowski. Like if Charles Bukowski didn't want to gamble on horses, then putting him in a racetrack would be a problem, right? So
Sure.
what they would say is say, oh, okay, you know that you bet on horses and bet on horses often. Maybe don't go here.
Yeah,
Or if you
absolutely.
do go here, here are some strategies that you might use to prevent you from gambling. And here's X, Y, and Z. And it's kind of like looking at that spot where it's like, what are the high risk situations, and how can you address that by with some skills that you need to learn.
That actually specifically segues beautifully into the last one here, which is that gambling is a time consuming habit. And it also one that often requires a specific geographical location, unless you're gambling online, of course. But
Uh-huh.
like you have to, and what I mean by that is you have to go to the casino. You have to go to the horse racing place, like to place a bet. You have to go somewhere to do it. And it often takes time to do it. Like you're there for an hour, a few hours, maybe. So there's a lot that is involved in engaging in gambling. That's actually part of the reason it persists in the first place.
Right.
So, being that that's the case, one strategy that people have used as far as trying to treat gambling addiction is to plan with these sort of quote unquote activity schedules is the sort of the idea. And with activity schedules, the whole point is to avoid the kinds of downtime that might enable someone making the choice to gamble. You could sort of think of it as like a distraction. It's just,
Yeah.
can I keep you so busy that you don't find the time or opportunity to build gambling into your schedule? And I think that to a point, that could work. I think you could get people who, if they're willing, if they want to quit gambling, they're willing to adhere to a schedule. You probably could get some success with giving them enough other things to do. But I also know that like people will find a way to sacrifice something else if they can, if they're like motivated enough. So like if you have managed to fill up their whole day such that like from waking to going to bed, they did not have an opportunity to choose gambling, they might then choose gambling instead of sleep. And
Right.
so they're like, that's one thing they can definitely control. So it's not to say that it wouldn't work. It very well might for some people, but that is a consideration around that.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Now, one of the things to consider is that when we start looking at activity schedules, one of the things that we have to put in our activity schedules is ads. And so we're sorry that that's built in, and it might distract you from other things that are going on, but here's an ad just in case it works for you.
Beautiful, beautiful segue.
Thanks.
There was something on this impulsivity thing I wanted to come back to, and I completely forgot. Let me think about it for just a second.
Yeah.
Um, so I found a study by Mark Dixon because he did a bunch with gambling before he got all into the peak stuff.
Right.
And he had done it was kind of just surveying. It wasn't actually about um treatment, but it had to do with the delayed discounting stuff. What was it? Okay.
Oh,
It was the people who, oh, it's like slowly coming back to me. I'm like getting little pieces of it. Um, do you know what I'm talking about?
I've got an idea. There's a theory, isn't it? Like, didn't they come up with a theory?
No, he was like just, at least the one that I found, it was specifically just comparing, um, he was like looking at people who engaged the delayed discounting model. Those who were made more impulsive choices were also likely to gamble more or something like that. But that's not exactly it. What do with that? My references. Fucking didn't. Idiot. I remember liking it because I remember thinking, um, it's helpful to sort of pull in like to the delayed discounting thing, why that's relevant. is to
Hmm.
specifically show something like people who were who had oh, I remember what it was. Okay, great.
Okay. Yay, there you go.
Sorry that took so long. Okay. Beep. So we have some more sort of interesting, I think, tidbits to pull in and talk about here related to gambling and gambling addiction. But we had talked about this whole delayed discounting model, and the reason that that was relevant to gambling is because they were saying that people who are more impulsive may be more likely to gamble, right? And so what they there was a study that I found where what they did is they basically took people who were already sort of self-proclaimed gambling addicts, and they gave them a delayed discounting task, meaning they would propose hypotheticals. Would you rather have, a dollar now or $10 2 weeks from now? And
Right.
is sort of how those scenarios are set up. It's not exactly that, but they look for like at what point, how long in time would it have to be before more money stops being worth it because you had to wait so long? And then they basically say that that's how much the value of that reward has diminished, and so that's how the whole thing is set up. Anyway, point being that in this study, what they did with people who were gamblers is that they did find that gamblers tended to have a steeper discounting rate, meaning that they were more impulsive, is how they would describe that, than people who were not gamblers. And so that
Okay.
did sort of show. Now, this is maybe a chicken and egg sort of situation. Were they gambling because they were impulsive, or did they become more impulsive because they were gambling a lot? Probably a little bit of both. At least we know that they were gambling at some point and then they engaged in impulsive behaviors. So that could be the direction. But it's possible that they found gambling so rewarding because they sort of had that impulsivity. But again, who knows whether that's a relevant way to sort of unpack gambling necessarily, but it was something that they found in that study at least.
That's super interesting. I mean, I wish I maybe the word's not wish. I'm glad to see that behavior analysis is trying to tackle gambling or at least address it in some conceptual way because and that's actually feel like such a big part of behavior analytic literature is like looking at gambling and like the schedules and the behaviors and all that stuff too. Like I feel like it's one of kind of the maybe more underscored but and not necessarily underscored. What's the word I'm looking for? Uh Underappreciated, under discussed maybe. It's there's a lot of gambling research is what I'm saying, and we
It's
don't
true.
talk about
There's
it a
a ton.
lot.
Yeah, it is interesting that I think there have been some behavior analysts who were really interested in gambling, and they did, sort of make their careers mostly about that, at least for a while. And it's never really comprised a huge amount of the literature, and I think it's because, if I had to guess, of sort of where funding is for different types of interventions inside of behavior analysis services, gambling has not been high on that list, I think. And so research and treatment have not been, I think, as sort of thoroughly informed by the work that's been done inside of this. But I do appreciate that people have put in the time and all that.
Yeah, I think it's the mobs.
That's what it is.
It's the
Like
mobs that are putting a kibosh on it.
we don't want you to be successful at this intervention, so they're shutting it down.
Yeah, they show up and they're like, "You keep doing this research, we're gonna break your legs."
There is another piece of this that I didn't really talk about in the probabilities section, but is worth discussing. I think as far as understanding treatment here is there's something called the near miss effect, and at least that's been talked about in research. Have you heard about this?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So the idea here is that particularly on slot machines, this is where they've done the majority of, matter of fact, another study I found by Dixon and colleagues like 2009, maybe, was like they did a survey of the type of research on gambling that's been done. And like 85% of it or more is on slot machines. So
Okay.
anyway, the near miss effect pertains to slot machines. The idea here is that those like drums that roll that have the pictures on them, like the sevens,
Yeah.
people are looking for like the three sevens in a row or something, or it says jackpot on it maybe.
Yeah.
um that the near miss effect is that you get two of those, and then the third one was just off the line. And so it was
Yeah,
really close to getting it. And the idea was that that would maintain gambling more if people sort of got really close to winning, but not quite there.
sure.
And I think that the research on that I've seen, so I sort of looked up a little bit of it for this, has been a little bit mixed in terms of whether the actual effect is maintaining gambling. Because just speaking behavior analytically, looking at schedules, I would expect that it would be the actual payouts that maintained gambling. And to be clear, I don't know if we've talked about this in here, but a payout often, there are tons of payouts that are not a jackpot. So like let's
Right.
say you put in $20 in a slot machine. A really common outcome is that you win like $1.50. And it's
Yeah.
like, so you went in with 20, you pulled the lever or you hit the button is more common anymore. And your $20 went to, now you have 21.50 in there. I'm like, that's not a huge jackpot. That's not a huge payoff. Most people are not going to cash out at that point. Now they're going to
No.
place more bets. They're like, well, that was pretty cool. I have $1.50. So I'm going to place some more bets. And then it drops down, it drops down. They're down to like $10 left after all their gambling. And the next one hits and it's like, you won $5. Like, wow, that's even more than last time. I got
Yeah.
$5. Your overall pot's only at $15 now, but like, hey, it's a big win. So I think
Yeah.
that I think the thing that maintains gambling more is a bunch of small wins that are not jackpots. And even as I said, the research I saw in the near miss seemed to suggest that like for some people that did seem like they were responding to it as if it were a win, in terms of how it affected their behavior. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's not consistent enough of an effect to really explain the addiction part. And maybe once you're at full blown addiction mode, where like the anticipation is as satisfying as the win, then maybe at that point that's where the near miss is likely to maintain. But it seems like it's not predictably a variable that's likely to engage, like have people engage in more gambling.
No, you know what's funny is I remember the first time I went to Vegas and I set some really clear rules because I'm somebody who can get sucked into stuff really quickly. So I was like, I know I'm gonna spend X amount of money and that's it.
Yeah,
And so I was telling my wife and I know how to play the games, but I'm not confident enough to walk up to a table and be like, I'm gonna play this game. So
sure.
slot machines are kind of my go-to. And so which I'm sure that I am just throwing money away. But it was one of those things where I put like 20 bucks in and I ended up losing like all of it and
Yeah,
then put another 20 bucks in and then like won 10 bucks on it. So like I
yeah,
got my 20 plus another 10. I was like, and I was telling my wife, I was like, I won 50 bucks. She's like, no, you won 10 bucks, but you lost 20. Like you lost
yeah,
20 bucks. Like, I was
yeah.
like, no, I won this. And she's like, no, that's not. I was like, and I was kind of just egging her on and being
Yeah.
that person. But I was like, no, I won 10 bucks. I won this. And she's like, you are ridiculous. So you can't go to Vegas anymore. So
There you go.
yeah. So when the next time I went, I just didn't gamble. I was like, I'm good. I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, the rule I always set for myself, which did work, it worked until it didn't, was that I was like, I'm willing to lose this amount of money. Like I'd have like $20 in
Right.
cash, right? And so then I would take that and I would gamble with that. And if I lost, um, if once I lost it, I was just done. I would walk out. And if I made more than that, then I would pocket the original amount and then just gamble off of my winnings. So like if
Yeah.
I put in 20 and I won 20, I'd put 20 in my pocket and then I'd just play off the 20. And that way, worst case scenario, I'd walk out with exactly as much money as I'd walked in with.
Right.
And I would have just had fun playing games. And so that was a rule that I was able to follow until I stopped following it and chased the losses, and that's where you get into trouble.
Yeah.
But I think if you use that strategy, you're more likely to end up at least not really regretting a bunch of decisions.
Sure. Sure.
Okay, we do have some interesting tidbits to get to, I think, but given that I don't even know how much time it's been some amount of time. We should probably take an ad break. Let's do an ad break.
Yeah. Why not?
Okay, so some fun things. One is the first one I'm going to share. I actually did not include in our notes here. Is I had found another study on gambling that I read where what they did. This confused me greatly. this isn't a journal. This isn't a. I'm not going to throw the authors under the bus or the journal, but suffice it to say, it's a pretty big journal and one that we both know. And
Okay.
in this journal, they sort of started by talking about the problem of gambling addiction. And then the point of the study that they did was to teach people to count cards better so that they'd be better at
Whoa.
blackjack. Yeah, I was like, um,
That's gonna get you thrown
hmm.
out of a casino real quick.
Yes. And also, I'm like, this is illegal. It also is like giving people who already have a problem a reason to do it more. Um,
Right.
and like not even just making it easier and more available, you're actually making it more enticing. So, um, I was like, I don't know that I would support this as being something that we like try and help people with
Ah,
necessarily. I don't, but
I
I
feel
also on
like
the like helping people be more successful maybe is good. I don't know. It felt weird.
yeah, I feel like that's one of those discussions about like ethics and research ethics and also
Yeah.
scope of competence. Like you have to know the legal boundaries of whatever you're studying. I wonder what kind of permissions they would have had to get to do that because like they've got to know that it was
Yeah.
illegal.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I do think like it was a hypothetical. Like they weren't actually gambling addicts that were the people they were working with. They weren't actually going to casinos, but they were like teaching them in the simulation how to count cards better, and they got better at it as an outcome of practice. Which
That's wild.
surprise. But yeah, I was like, this is a kind of question that makes me think. I'm like, how did? Hmm. I just I don't want to like sure they did fine designing their study, but it just seems like that's not like a great thing to teach people who may find themselves in a position of like addiction to do.
Right. Right. Yeah. Don't that's not the tool that you give somebody.
Yeah. So anyway, that
So
was
I
I
don't
just
know.
thought that was interesting.
Maybe it was a harm reduction
Maybe that
tactic.
was
I don't
it.
know.
They just
I don't
like
think it was.
lose less money.
Yeah, I don't think it was. One thing that is super interesting is people will actually gamble longer at slot machines that smell good as opposed to slot machines that smell bad or even neutral. That makes logical sense.
Yeah,
I've also seen situations where like it might not be the slot machine that smells bad, maybe it's the area around the slot machine that smells bad. Like if
sure.
somebody is like on a streak and they piss themselves at the slot machine, people do that. And
Yeah.
so they're like they don't want to lose their spot, they don't want to lose their streak, so like the area, maybe the carpet smells like urine. um but they get caught really quick and thrown out usually if that's
Y-
the case. But um
Yeah.
yeah, people like to hang out where it smells good. I mean, Disney's got this figured out. Like, if you walk down Main Street of Magic Kingdom, they're pumping in fresh popcorn smells, like
Mm,
or sweets or bakery stuff. Like they pump in the scents to get people to buy stuff. Like smell
smart.
is a really powerful thing.
Yeah, yeah. I understand why they would try and leverage that.
Yeah.
Um, so Nevada is actually not the only state with legalized gambling. Louisiana is also a state that has statewide legalized casinos. Now, that being said, 48 of the 50 US states do have some sort of gambling. The only two that have no form of gambling whatsoever are like diametrically opposed in how I think of them politically.
Uh-huh.
um, and that is Hawaii and Utah. And they don't even have a lottery or online gambling. So
Wow.
like yeah, so Nevada and Louisiana have full statewide legalized casinos. Most other states allow some form of gambling, at least online, or they'll have like a designated spot where you can potentially go gamble. Only Hawaii and Utah, you will find no gambling of any sort.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Yeah, Hawaii and Utah, two very different places.
Yeah,
Um,
like so different.
like
The
so
the
different on
only
every
thing they have
level.
in common is that they're like close to saltwater, I guess.
Which is funny because like Utah really shouldn't have that designation, but here we are.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they're landlocked.
Geography's weird. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
landlocked. Why are they near saltwater? Oh wait,
yeah,
there's a
very
big
salty
lake.
water. Yeah.
Now,
So
non-human animals do not seem to do anything like gambling, although some primates will engage in suboptimal choice making and gambling-like tasks. So, like, you'll see that there's like maybe like a kernel of that, but not necessarily a gambling type of behavior, at least on the level that we understand it. So,
yeah, and so a lot of gambling research they've tried to do with animals, and they seem to have a really hard time getting animals to gamble, because it's a fairly complex language type thing to understand. Giving up something in the hope that you might get something more that requires you understanding that, like, understanding exchange, understanding temporal delay, understanding now versus then, like
right,
those foundational components are things that most animals do not demonstrate the ability to do the way that we do them. And so gambling
right,
just means nothing to them in that way, at least in the way they've tried to arrange it in the research so far. Maybe they'll figure it out and they'll find, like,
right,
oh, it just turns out that all you have to do is like do this thing, and then they'll gamble like crazy.
right,
But anyway, so the closest they've gotten is to get them to make suboptimal choices, essentially meaning that they could optimize their rewards by doing X, but instead they chose to do Y, which had less than optimal rewards. And
right.
so they sort of then equate that to gambling in some ways. But yeah, interestingly, humans seem to be the only animals that do anything like gambling exactly.
That's, I mean, just fascinating. And I think that goes back to like our discussion for our patrons, where we're talking about language being a powerful tool. Um, but we'll save that for the if you wanna see that discussion, join the Patreon because we discussed it a whole lot.
Yes, well, that is true. All right. I think that that's all that we have to talk about with respect to gambling addiction. Is there anything that I missed or anything you'd like to add before we wrap it up today?
No, I think that covers it. We covered quite a bit.
We did. All right. Well, credit where credit is due. If you would like to support this podcast, then you can head over to our website and pick up some merch. You can join us on Patreon. You can leave a rating and review. You can subscribe. You can tell a friend about us. If you do join us on Patreon, we're going to read your name because we really appreciate the people who have been so generous with their money and their time with us, who have really taken on supporting us as a show. And that includes Mike M, Megan, Layla, Mike T, Justin, Kim, Joshua, Brad, Stephanie, Olivia, Brian, Ashley, Kiara, Christy, and Michelle. Thank you all so much.
Yay! Y'all are the best.
And of course, I could not do this without my team of people, writing and fact checking from Shane, Jess, and myself. Jess is back with us. She was a
Welcome
writer a long
back.
time ago and is back in the crew, which is great. And audio editing and production comes from Justin Greenhouse. Our social media coordinator is Emma Wilson. If you would like to talk to us about gambling or gambling addiction or anything else that we got right in here, or just send us compliments, you can do that. You can email us directly at info@wwd.podcast.com. You can reach out to us on the social media platforms. If you like to complain about us, you can go over to Truth Social, where no one will hear you. Um,
Perfectly fine.
Yep, and that's totally fine. Of course, we're happy to hear constructive criticism. You can reach out to us with that too. Anyway, thank you all very much for listening, and thank you for recording with me today, Shane. Is there anything that I missed or anything you'd like to add before we get to some recommendations?
Nope. I think that covers it on that front.
All right, that is gambling. We have done it. So let's recommend some things.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first while you put yours in?
Yes, please.
All right. So my recommendation is a record. By the time this episode is out, it will have been released. But it's a band I've always really enjoyed, and I think that they were really fascinating, kind of interesting. I think group of musicians, and that band is called Into It Over It. Um, I don't know if you ever listened to them, but I think you would actually really like them. Just from like a
Hmm.
music standpoint. Like I think that they're just like a fascinating kind of like Midwest emo style, but like um they're musicians, like just really good musicians that do really cool things. So, and they've just kind
Hmm.
of every album they put out has gotten progressively more interesting.
Wow.
And
Love
yeah,
that.
so they're called Into It Over It. And on May 3rd, they put out a full-length LP called Interesting Decisions 2020 to 2023. And this is what they said about the album. They said, uh here is here's an album that we've been excited about for some time. Into It Over It have said that in the studio for many years, if you cannot make a good decision, make an interesting one. And so this album is like yeah, which I was like, that's actually really an interesting way to put it. And so they originally it was this guy Evan Thomas Weiss, who was like, it was a solo project, Into It Over It, and he always kind of does these cool things. He had a full length called 52 Weeks where he wrote a song a week and recorded all of them. He did one where it was just names of cities that he had toured and like a song about that city that he had toured in. So he's done a
Wow.
lot of really cool things. And this one is just a bunch of B-sides, stuff that they had recorded together, stuff that they put out with like comps and different EPs and different splits, and they finally put them all together on this one album that you can buy, and it's really cool. And I pre-ordered this album and got it 2 weeks ahead of time before it was even released. So I'm really excited
Ooh,
to like dive into it. So it's
congratulations.
worth checking out. You can, yeah, thank you. You can go to their Bandcamp at intoitoverit.bandcamp.com, and you can check out the album called Interesting Decisions. And it's a really fun, I think it's a really cool listen. Like, especially if you're a fan of stuff like this.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Good to know. I'm interested in their decisions.
Yeah,
Um,
I like that.
have I? Sorry, Justin. I might have to cut this part. Have I already talked? Have I recommended the movie Monkey Man? I know we've talked about it, but I don't know if I
Yes,
recommended it.
I think you did.
I did recommend it. Okay. Did I recommend Dune Part Two?
I don't think you did.
Okay. And that one's been a while too. Maybe I'm gonna recommend something completely different then. Okay. This is the one I had in my mind, so I'm just gonna recommend it. Okay. Beep. I am recommending a YouTube channel. This is it's so nerdy. I guess I would like to qualify this by saying this is probably not for everybody, but I'm gonna recommend it anyway. And so this is a YouTube channel. It's called Dice Tower. It's a board game YouTube channel
Okay,
that they do reviews, they do like playthroughs, they do rules, they do a lot of like opinion discussions, and it's I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's just it's a fun channel that just talks a lot about board games. So if you're interested in board games, they do so many different ways of talking about board games. Sometimes they'll do like, all right, here's our top 10 3-player board games, here's our top 10 2-player board games, here's our top 10
sure.
science board games, here's our top 100 board games of all time. Here's like they just every single thing that you could think about that's related to board games, they do in some capacity. And so the Dice Tower is just it's a fun channel that I recommend checking out if people are like interested in learning about board games or watching anything about board games. Which like most people aren't, but like because they're so variable in the kind of things they produce, maybe people will want to check it out. So anyway, that's it. The YouTube channel Dice Tower, they just talk about board games, and that's the thing that I talk about. So I like to watch YouTube videos about it.
Yeah, you like to share. You like to share your joys. I love that.
Yeah, I mean that's what recommendations are. It's just sharing our joys.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So anyway, I think that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. Is there anything else to add before we wrap up?
Nope. I got nothing else.
Okay, we'll see you next time for more addiction stuff. Probably. This is Abraham.
And this is Shane.
We're out.
See ya.
Speaking of which, what do we have coming up for subsequent
Um,
topics here?
I don't know. If you're doing treatments, I gotta look at the list and see what I've got going on. So
We haven't talked about food addiction yet.
maybe I'll take that one.
Yeah, if you want to. Um, I think we are starting to wind down on like what we had even sort of conceptualized as being things to talk about.
Yeah. I've got a list
Um,
I've got a list and I'll take a look and see if there's anything that we're missing on it, but we are getting close to the end.
yeah. So we've done sex addiction, gambling, we just did as a two-parter. Treatment for addiction I have on the list, which I've already started. Um, yeah, that's most of what I had written down.
Yeah. I've got it printed somewhere, so I'll take a look and see.
Okay, cool. All right, so we're probably gonna have to be introducing the end of this, and then we'll move on to regular things again.
Yeah, we'll move on to something somewhere.
Yeah. I kind of thought
Uh,
about tackling some sort of political things, given this is an election year, mostly because some shit like comes up every single time that I feel like is worth unpacking. and a lot of times it's just misunderstandings. People who like they have this narrative that's just it's so divorced from reality that
Right.
like sometimes just taking as like let's just take let's take a 5-minute news clip and spend the rest of the hour unpacking everything that they said that was wrong. Um,
Yeah.
and just and digging into it and like taking the argument. So like part of my research for the treatments thing, I stumbled across this really interesting it was like it was on a news show and it was a debate and it was between Matthew Perry and some random guy and this was on the BBC. So he was like in London or something doing this debate. And this guy that he was debating was saying um like we need to so basically Matthew Perry was in favor of drug courts.
Okay.
And he was like this helped me, this helps a lot of people. Drug courts are good because it instead of putting them through a criminal process it puts them through like a resource finding thing.
Right.
And that's what people need. And he said this guy he's arguing with is like if people like the purpose he phrased it really interesting. He's like once people got to the point where they've gotten arrested, the system has failed because the system is supposed to deter them. So what we need is to have he's like drug courts are watering down our legal system by making it so that uh law is not a deterrent for them. And we want to stop them from starting by deterring them by making harsh penalties for engaging in drugs. That was his whole thing. And
Okay.
nobody made I mean, it's stupid because we've already sort of addressed this point, but like nobody made this point in the discussion where they're like, um, the exact thing that when we made in harm reduction. I'm like, so first of all, let's start with the fact that like the system we've had up until this point has been let's arrest people and put them in jail for using drugs. That how did that work out? Like
Right.
we have way more crime, way more people in prison, and a record number of people doing drugs. So
Right.
whatever youth like, first of all, that clearly didn't work. Second, like you then again, it's taking the approach of like thinking someone was like, I wasn't going to do heroin, but because my only outcome if I do is I'll go to drug court, I think I'll go ahead and give it a try. Like nobody thought that. Nobody ever thought
Right.
that. Like at
Right.
no point
Ever.
was like no one in the history of using drugs made like decided that they weren't going to use drugs because they were illegal.
Right.
And like alternatively, no one that wasn't going to use drugs chose to use them just because they were legal. So like I don't know. It's just it's such a stupid argument that's based on nothing. And like nobody really I think made good counters to his arguments and like they would sort of criticize him say what you're saying is nonsense, it's just not true. And he was like show me the evidence that it's not true. And I was like I mean he's wrong, but like nobody's rebutting him correctly. They're just
Right.
basically calling him names and telling him he's silly. And I'm like, and
Right.
so him pointing out that their arguments aren't very good is correct. And
Right.
anyway, long story short, is just like I see all these things of like people trying to make these arguments. I'm like, let's just go like logically unpack these, empirically unpack these, like because it's just nonsense. And so I kind of had the thought of like, let's just go through all the stupid shit that people say. Like, I think I told you the my in-laws that were staying with me were like talking about how the problem with electric cars is we get all our batteries from China. And I was
Yes.
like,
Yes.
yeah, like your car was made in Japan and all of your oil comes from Saudi Arabia. So
Right.
shut up.
So you have a bad argument. Like
Yeah.
that's like yeah. But they'll you know, you hear people argue like, well, it's not the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the other problem too is like a decent number of things that they say like have a nugget of truth in them. They're like, because they'll say like, oh, we shouldn't be investing in electric cars because it's really hard to recycle batteries. I'm like, it is hard to recycle batteries. That is a legitimate concern and something we need to overcome. And we
Right.
need to do something about our crisis that we're dealing with here. And this is a solution to that crisis. So
Right.
while it's not like, it is not a solution without impacts, it is a solution. So
Right.
like, even though we can't recycle batteries very well right now, this is one of our best solutions moving forward that we need
Right.
to
It's a step in
invest
the
in.
right direction.
Exactly. So like there's gonna be some costs associated with this. We don't have any silver bullets. Like all we have is compromises that move us in the right direction.
Right.
And like that's true for wind. Like it's a really good example of like wind power is like generally speaking, it is good, but there are costs. They're expensive. They can kill birds. They can screw up habitats because they're really loud, that they're nearby. They do require a lot of resources that do not last forever and have to be replaced. All those are true. And they're
Right.
still a million times better than fossil fuels.
Right.
So like they're not a perfect solution, but they are a solution.
Right.
And like we'll get better at this stuff as we invest in it more and we research it more and all of that. But like we have to make these changes. So like
Right. We got to do something.
yeah. So I'm like a solution is better than like don't let don't let perfect be the enemy of good enough, to at
Right.
least
Right.
yeah.
Exactly. I love
So
that.
anyway, if and when it becomes relevant, it might be worth unpacking some of this because I hear all these stupid fucking arguments that they make all the time. They're like, and again, it's like it sounds almost like they make logical sense, and they just, if you really think about it, they don't ever make logical sense.
Right. Well, but that's the thing is like, yeah, people just they're arguing with so little information.
Yeah.
Or like a viewpoint that works for them,
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna go grocery shopping because I gotta go
Cool.
do that.
Bye, patrons.
Bye, y'all.